Okay, 3, 2, 1, here we go. Hello and welcome to the Avanti Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Dave Mammano, your host, and we are here to help entrepreneurial achievers and business owners and leaders move forward so that they can reach their potential. I do this by interviewing the nation's best business movers and shakers. Today, I have on the show Dr. Tasha Eurich. Tasha, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Hey, so excited, so excited. You are, I'm going to make you blush a little bit, and so you're probably happy that we're not videotaping this, but you're kind of a big deal. You're kind of a big deal. I reached out to you a few months ago. I heard you on another podcast, was very impressed, and went to your website and emailed, and you and your assistant got back to me, and we made this happen, so I really appreciate it.
Me too. Yeah, here we are.
Here we are. So I'm going to read your biography so everybody can learn a little bit more about you, and then we will dig in. So Tasha Eurich is an organizational psychologist, researcher, and New York Times best-selling author. She built a reputation as a fresh, modern voice in the business world by pairing her scientific grounding in human behavior with a pragmatic approach to professional development. Over her 15-year-plus career, she's helped thousands of leaders, from public company CEOs to early-stage entrepreneurs, improve their self-awareness and their success. She contributes to Harvard Business Review, and her work has been featured in outlets like NPR, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, Forbes, and Fast Company. Her TEDx Mile High talks have been viewed more than 3 million times. Thinkers 50 has named her one of the top 30 emerging management thinkers in the world and a top 50 world leader in coaching. And she ranked number 13 on the Global Gurus list of organizational culture experts. Dr. Eurich was also chosen from more than 16,000 candidates as one of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 coaches to advance the practice of leadership with Dr. Goldsmith. He is recognized as one of the world's most influential leadership thinkers. Dr. Eurich's first book, Bankable Leadership, debuted at number 8 on the New York Times bestseller list. Her latest book, Insight, delves into the connection between self-awareness and success. Hailed as a bold, exhilarating take on self-improvement by Success Magazine and a fascinating read by The Guardian, Insight was named a best book of 2017 by Strategy Plus Business and nominated for one of the best books of the year from 1-800-CEO Read. As a sought-after keynote speaker, Dr. Eurich partners with her clients to deliver a highly interactive experience that cements learning and maximizes behavior change. Also, a tightly customized event that addresses the specific pain points of their organization and or industry. Also, several actionable tools that participants can apply immediately. And last but not least, insights from cutting-edge science translated into bite-sized, easy-to-digest nuggets. Wow, wow, wow. All right, Tasha, that was amazing. What a slacker. I think you really need to up your game a little bit.
I'm trying.
This, usually after I print this out and after I read it, I'll, my guest bios, I'll put it in the garbage, just, recycling, of course. But this one I got to keep. This is something else. You really have done some incredible things. And I imagine for you, hearing that, you must be like, wow, I did all that, right? So,
well, yeah, I was telling you before we started recording, it's always gratifying to hear people recognize the successes we've all had. And, everybody who's listening to this has their own. And I think sometimes, especially type A entrepreneurs, we just get so focused on chasing that next thing that, we don't really stop that often to say, oh, I did this. And maybe that's pretty cool. Even if it's not everything I want to accomplish, I want to be proud of it.
Yeah, well, you should be. And I think you're a really unique person in your field because there are, in today's world, there are a lot of coaches and consultants, right? I mean, I think 20 years ago, if you said you were a coach, people said, oh, what team, right? Like athletic team. And today, I've heard from business owners that there's almost like, coaching fatigue, right? There's so many coaches out there. And I think what makes you really uniquely qualified and different is, just first of all, all the education you've had, right? I don't know how many business coaches are PhDs in their field. and then just all the incredible content you're putting out, the books, the speaking, and mixing, your coaching, business strategies with science, right? I mean, that is some great stuff. So congratulations. I'm just interested in, how did it all start? Did you plan on pursuing this education with intents of getting into helping business owners and their teams succeed, or was it did you start as one thing and move into this?
So I'm proud to be a third generation entrepreneur, and probably the single most central figure in my life, professionally and personally, has been my mom. And I grew up, she started actually the first school in the country in the 1980s that trained and certified nannies for couples, who both worked, or for single parents. And so I literally followed her around all the time and watched her do these amazing things. And I just kind of fell in love with business, and I fell in love with leadership. And I'd always been interested in psychology. I didn't quite have an exact plan that was what I was going to study in college, but about halfway through my undergrad, I found this discipline called organizational psychology. And it was basically the marriage of pretty much everything I thought was cool at the time, which is, people and business and leadership. And I was really lucky to, I actually had to move to New York. It was the summer of 2001. And I because there wasn't a class in organizational psychology at the tiny liberal arts college I went to. And I remember it was taught by this very bored Italian TA. It was like the summer class and nobody wanted to be there. And in the first 5 minutes of the class, it was like the skies opened, and I kind of knew what I wanted to do. And I'm grateful for that moment. And I think, sometimes I wonder, what if I had never moved to New York? What if I hadn't stumbled upon that article? But really for me, that set my course. And after that, it was just a matter of saying, okay, how do I want to pursue this? I did spend about 5 years. So I went to graduate school. I taught, I did consulting while I was there. I spent about 5 years in the Fortune 500 world, mostly because I knew a lot of consultants who had never worked before in a company. And I thought, well, how am I going to help CEOs run their business if I've never worked in one? But then eventually, about 8 years ago, I went off on my own. And I think, hopefully, God willing, this is what I'll be doing for a very long time.
Excellent. Well, you're off to a good start.
I'm trying.
So, the Avanti family of listeners and viewers and our coaching programs, they are not, the Fortune 500, right? We're the crazy mad scientists, entrepreneurs, the visionaries, trying to stay focused and trying to move forward, despite the fact that we're always not the best managers and that we're always chasing the next bright, shiny object, right? And that's, what I try to do is when I interview people is get their insights on how to help entrepreneurs, focus and really, get in touch with their superpowers and how do they harness those for the business and spend most of the time doing those things and, hire people that complement all the stuff that frankly they're just not good at. Right. So if, in your bio, I know you do work with some bigger companies, but you also work with startups and entrepreneurs. So, based on your experience, the past 15 years, et cetera, your books and your speaking, if you're sitting down with a group of people that have just started a business, maybe, 6 months to a year into it, they're getting the flywheel turning. What are some of the first things you're going to do, or you're going to advise them to do on how to scale to that level of like, okay, this business is going to work?
That's a great question. And obviously every entrepreneur is different, and that's part of why I love working with them. But really, if you take a step back and you think about the journey of an entrepreneur, of starting something from scratch, bootstrapping it, getting funding, hopefully growing the company, growing your top line, growing your employees. One of the most important things that I think is often missed in that process is self-awareness. And I don't mean self-awareness about, sort of navel gazing or going to therapy, but really what I mean by self-awareness is as a CEO, as a leader, do you understand who you are, what drives you, and do you have an appreciation for how other people see you? And how do those two things interact? There's a lot of research we've done that shows that, our self-perceptions are very rarely shared by the people around us. There's a lot of surprises, both positive and negative. And so from my perspective, that's what I think is very central to the long-term success of any CEO. To be able to evolve with the company with each life cycle that you're in, you've got to be questioning your assumptions, not just about your business or your market, but yourself. You've got to be getting that feedback. You've got to be creating a culture where people can tell each other and you the truth. So from my standpoint, I think that's the most fundamental basic skill that I think will really help every entrepreneur be successful no matter what they're doing.
Excellent. So essentially what you're saying is that they control the people and the rest of the organization by being self-aware and controlling themselves first.
That's what I see. And I think, probably the best way for people to have this hit home is, think about the least self-aware boss you've ever had and think about how it felt to work for them. What did it feel like to go into work every day? What was the quality of your work product? How innovative were you able to be? How safe did you feel? How much did you trust that person? And by and large, those extremely unself-aware people, sometimes they do get promoted. And whether it's a small growing company or a large established company, you've got to navigate that. But the beauty of being an entrepreneur is you get to build that culture. And whether you like it or not, the biggest ambassador of that culture that you want to create is going to be you. Are you walking the talk? Are you humble? Are you listening to feedback? And those are the things that, the good news is almost anyone can improve that skill. We've also found in our research that a lot of what we think we know about building self-awareness as leaders is actually wrong. But if you have the right path to get there, really amazing things can happen.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 plus years. And I think the first 5 years I was constantly perplexed why people just didn't act the way that I wanted them to,
Right, exactly. What's wrong with these people?
I know. What's wrong? Why isn't everybody like me? This is the way I would do it, and then I realized well, thank God they're not like me, right? We need
exactly.
ship. And then, I started locally here in Rochester. I started taking some leadership courses from a guy named John Engels, who's, very well versed into the self-awareness strategies for leaders and to really see how my actions and reactions ripple, right? So I realize that I actually influence people's actions and reactions based on my actions, right? And my reactions. And then you can use that, and I want to say manipulate in a good way, right? You can manipulate the culture of the organization to be more effective and to be more transparent and to be more sustainable without the leader having to have his or her finger in everything by being self-aware of what I'm going to say and how the person may react to that, right? And it really was a game changer for me.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And that mirrors the experience of a lot of my clients and a lot of the best leaders I know, which is that realization that, as much as it feels good and feels normal for me to be the star and for me to be involved in everything, success is really driving that down. And not only is your business going to be more successful, but you might even have some free time as well.
Yeah. That's and entrepreneurs want freedom and free time, right?
Indeed.
But no, and for me, it was being okay with, quote unquote, swallowing my pride, putting aside my ego, not having to play God, right? I mean, I think a lot of, leaders and CEOs, they want to have all the answers. They want to be perceived as the smartest, person in the company. And I realized that was the worst thing I could do, right? I remember people would walk in my office and ask me questions, and I would try to answer them because I was the leader, right? And I had to have all the answers. And then, John, my leadership coach, coached me on asking questions back. And, someone runs to my office with a fire, and then I say, wow, I don't know how to handle that. What do you think you should do? And lo and behold, they come up with some pretty good answers, right? And then that empowers them to not run in my office every time and handle the problem or opportunity themselves in the future, which, to your point, leads more free time and less stress for me, right?
Oh my gosh, that's so well said. I love that example.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank you. And then, and I'm just going down memory lane here. He taught me so much, and I'm sure you teach this too, the proverbial triangles, right? So, John comes to me because he has a problem with Mary, and then, and then of course the leader like, well, I'm gonna mediate and solve this problem, but going back to John once again, wow, I don't know how to handle that. What do you think is the best way to handle that with Mary so this problem can be resolved? And all of a sudden, John and Mary are handling it themselves, and it's a beautiful thing, right?
It is, yeah. It's so funny because when you're building a company, you literally don't have the time to sit down and say, well, what kind of a culture do I want to create, and how am I going to show up? And but I think what separates the most successful entrepreneurs from those that are not successful is making that time and being very strategic and mindful and clear about what they're trying to create in their culture and modeling that behavior. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Excellent. So tell me about your latest book. So Insight, right? The surprising truth about how others see us, how we see ourselves, and why the answers matter more than we think.
So for my whole career, I have had the humbling pleasure of learning from so many leaders and, taking them, if I'm their coach, through a process of really self-discovery and figuring out what's working about their approach. What do they want to change? How are they going to do that? How are they going to make the change sustainable and lasting and, seen by their most important stakeholders? And one day, this was maybe about 6 or 7 years ago now, I was sort of just reflecting on that. I had just finished an assignment with this gentleman. I call him Steve in the book. And he had gone from basically being a boss that was so terrible that some of his employees were taking blood pressure medicine because of how much stress he was creating for them.
Oh my God.
And people were quitting left and right, and the CEO was about to fire him. In really 6 or 9 months, going from that to someone who was humble and who recognized the value that others brought and who understood how he wanted to be seen and what he needed to do to change that. And, I just thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, somebody needs to bottle this. But then as a scientist, I wondered, what do we actually know scientifically about this management buzzword we keep tossing around called self-awareness? And as I got into it, I realized that we actually didn't know very much empirically. I think it's the self-awareness is something that people just love to toss around their own personal theories. Ask yourself why you do the things you do, or get more feedback. But there isn't really that grounding of science of like, what's actually going on here? What is self-awareness? Where does it come from? Why do we actually need it? How do we get more of it? And so I sort of naively at the time was like, well, if no one's done this, then I shall do it. It ended up, I thought it would be like a nice little 6-month research program. And we ended up doing this for about 5 years. And there's more than a dozen people on our research team. So I'm really speaking on behalf of the whole team. But that was what we did, is we wanted to know scientifically, how can we bottle self-awareness? And I mentioned this earlier, but we found really surprising findings that a lot of the things that we sort of commonly accept as true, not only are not leading to self-awareness in some cases, they might be hurting our self-awareness. And so that was what our job was to write a book that was, hopefully an entertaining guide with some stories, but ultimately, what can leaders do to see themselves more clearly, to understand how they're seen, and to use that to be more successful in their business.
Excellent. So you said in the beginning that you are an entrepreneur, which I love. And I think sometimes when people view, coaches and consultants and scientists as they wouldn't almost like a dentist, right? You wouldn't classify a dentist really as a business owner, but they are. Like we have a peer group, we have a mastermind group here in Rochester of dentists, right? And they're like, we're business owners. We need help with all this stuff too,
Right.
And so you are an entrepreneur, and I love to get the gritty story of how entrepreneurs started. So, I would love to just hear, you decided to, as they say, hang your shingle and start a business. What were some of the first things you did to literally get your own flywheel turning with clients and revenue?
So I had a little bit of an interesting origin story. I am sort of notoriously risk averse. And so for me, I was in the Fortune 500 world, and pretty much on day two, I said to myself, I don't think this is the place for me. I'm very, I have authority problems in general. I didn't like having a boss. I didn't like somebody telling me what to do or how to use my time. I didn't feel like I could be as creative as I wanted to be. But I also, again, I felt like I needed to sort of do my time in that world so that I could be as helpful to my clients as possible. But when I finally decided, okay, I'm going to do this, I was working for the CEO of a large hospital in Denver. And I had just sort of gone in when most of the people I was working with, the nurses and the physician leaders, didn't even know what organizational psychology was. We were able to get some really powerful outcomes. Like we saved $5 million in turnover as a result of a lot of the programs that we implemented in less than a
Wow.
year. And so I sort of thought, oh wow, this is actually like my test, my dry run of what it would look like if I went out on my own as a consultant. And so what I discovered was, yeah, I think I'm ready. I think it's time. And I had a boss at the time who was very entrepreneurial himself, being the CEO of a hospital. And he actually let me go down to 3 long days a week. And what I ended up doing is working at the hospital 3 days a week, and then starting my consulting practice the other 4 days of the week. And I didn't really think it through that much beyond like, well, maybe if I can get a couple clients in a couple years, I'll step away and make this my full-time gig. And what happened was it was so fast that I had to exit the hospital just a couple of months later. And so I think what was very cool about that was having the luxury of, not sitting awake every night wondering how I was going to pay my mortgage. But I also was really happy that it happened faster than I thought it would. So for me, the name of the game is relationships. You can't just start hitting up people and trying to take their money. You've got to partner with them and say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish and how can I help you do that? And, over the course of the work, the 8 or so years that I've had this business, I write, I consult, we have products. Product development is my Achilles heel, by the way. We're trying, but so there's this really kind of big portfolio of stuff that we do, and we're just learning as we go.
That's great. That's great. Well, you're a unique mix of a risk averse entrepreneur, right?
Yes, I'm very weird like that. I probably don't have the courage and bravery that all the other folks who are listening to this have, but we all do our best with what we have.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of a misnomer about entrepreneurs being risk takers. I think most successful entrepreneurs, we certainly push the envelope, but we're weighing the options, right? Like, what is the best case scenario? What is the worst case scenario? And should I move forward? It's not like we're just recklessly, I'm not going to start Avanti hot dog stand tomorrow because I want to. It's like let's look at what's the worst case, what's the best case. If we try this new product and it doesn't work out, is it going to kill the company or is it going to be a bruise, right? And then make the decision forward. And certainly there are some crazy risky entrepreneurs, but I think most of us, maybe they're not risk averse as you because you're more of a scientist, methodical. But I think the majority of entrepreneurs that I know that are successful certainly want to push the envelope, but they do it in more of an educated step-by-step way.
Yeah, and what I've experienced too, just working with so many of them, is what really drives that conviction is just a deep down belief in what they're doing. Really believing that this thing has to get into the world, and it is a commercial idea, and it will be an important idea, and it will make people's lives better. And obviously, you can't take blind risks. I don't think anyone successful has ever done that sustainably. But to me, I'm very inspired when I work with entrepreneurs just because of that underlying passion and conviction that they have. It's so cool.
Well, we're scientists too, but we're mad scientists, right?
I love it.
Very good. Someone described me. I have a friend, Mary, and she described me. I overheard her describing me to another person. Oh, that's Dave Mammano, and so Dave's the type of guy where if you're hiking and you see this beautiful cliff that leads to water, some people won't even go up because they're scared. Some people will tiptoe up, look over to see what's there first. And then some people like Dave will just, run and jump. And And I'm like, well, I don't know if I do that, but okay. In her mind, I'm just like this rugged, crazy entrepreneur, right?
I love it.
So we've gotten to know the business career side of Tasha. What is the personal side? What are your hobbies, some of your habits for success? What do you do for fun?
So I really try to have fun, and I've got a lot of people around me that force that if I'm getting a little too obsessed with whatever project I'm working on at the moment. But
Mhm.
I am I'm a musical theater nerd. I actually was an actor for several decades before I went into this, and I was a theater major in college. I did some professional theater. From a self-awareness standpoint, I knew that I was at best like a B actor. And so I knew it wasn't going to be my, lifelong profession, but it's something that the love for it never went away. So now I'm more of a consumer of theater. And I love that part of my life and not being able to, or not having to let that go in the same way. I love animals. There's a really great organization that I work with called the National Mill Dog Rescue, and they rescue and rehabilitate animals and dogs mostly who have been in puppy mills, right? These large commercial breeding facilities. And we have one such dog, this little 5-pound poodle named Fred. And it's been unbelievable to be able to adopt her and rehabilitate her and show her, what is it like to go outside and what does it mean to have a human who loves you and to get vet care. And so that's another thing I'm really passionate about. And then just in general, I love to travel. I always joke that my profession has been a good excuse for me to just get on a plane for any reason at all and go see some really interesting, cool places in the world. But my husband and I love to travel just for fun as well.
Great. And you can mix your speaking gigs in with some cool travel, right?
That's the name of the game.
I love it. I love it. Getting paid to travel. There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I also just want to hear more about your TEDx talk. I mean, 3 million views. That is phenomenal. And we'll put the link to that in the show notes. But tell us, the overview of your TEDx talk.
So it's actually 2 talks that I did. One was in, oh gosh, this is embarrassing, I think 2014, and the other was in 2017. And it was actually great. Most TED Talks, they don't get as many views as this, and I was able to partner with TEDx Mile High, which is a great affiliate, to get 2 talks that have 1.5 plus million views, which is so cool. But from my perspective, it's the same as your listeners, right? If you're offering something of value to others, that is what helps it be successful. So really trying to get into the head of people. And the first one was about how to be totally awesome at anything you do, including being a leader. And I gave them 3 steps to become better at anything. Know yourself, pick one thing to work on at a time, and practice daily. And I kind of broke that down about how to do it. And then my most recent talk was from my new book, Insight, where we went kind of in depth into this idea that actually thinking about ourselves is often not related to self-awareness. And it was a super weird finding that at first I was like, oh my God, maybe self-awareness is bad. But what we discovered is that introspection in and of itself is helpful. It's just that most people are doing it wrong. So it was kind of a talk on the misconceptions of introspection and what people should do instead.
Excellent. Well, we'll have links to both those in the show notes for people I'm sure are going to want to watch and listen to those. So my last question, which is always my favorite question, if you could spend an hour with somebody famous in history, who would that be and why?
I have to preface this by saying, at first, this is going to sound like the most boring answer ever, but I'll tell you why, because I think it's a good reason. And that would be George Washington.
Oh, that's great. I like that.
Yeah, but it's like, well, anyone can say George Washington. But I read Ron Chernow's biography of him, which for any American history buffs that are listening is absolutely wonderful. It's one of the best biographies I've ever read. But what I learned about him was so interesting was that early on, as a kind of fresh, bratty general, he had some spectacular failures on the battlefield. And we sort of talk about him like this untouchable, perfect leader. And it was so interesting to me to just see the evolution of him from, again, very, very unself-aware, very brash, to someone who is widely celebrated as one of the best leaders we've ever had in the United States. And so to me, those are the types of stories that I just get so excited about. And I'm so happy to be involved with my clients is, how do you take someone who is, maybe doing okay, or for whom success isn't coming as easy as it used to, and really helping them achieve a whole new level of success and impact.
That is awesome. No, that's great. We had such a great wide variety with that question. We've had everybody from, Jesus Christ to Nikola Tesla to Abraham Lincoln to Susan B. Anthony. You're the first George Washington. So
cool.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And well, certainly he's one of the reasons why we're here in this great country today and being able to enjoy the freedoms that we do, right?
Well said, especially around this time of year.
Yep, absolutely. So, well, Tasha, this has been super, super fantastic. We'll have everything in the show notes, but just for people who are listening, want to pull over their car right now and dig in, where can they find you? How can they get in touch with you?
So I've learned over the years that it's really less about me and more about what can I do to support, in this case, your listeners. So what we made is something that is a quick 5-minute self-assessment to figure out how self-aware you are. And it's something that we just did for the book launch. It's kind of fun. I wouldn't make any major life decisions based off of it, but it takes about 5 minutes. You send it to someone who knows you well, you get their input, and then you get this nice little report that kind of gives you a high-level picture and a couple things you can do to be more self-aware as a leader. So if anybody wants to take that, they can find it at insight-quiz.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and we'll have your website and everything. It's your name, and you're the only Tasha Eurich in the world. Is that right?
I believe so. That is our best efforts have not located another one.
Excellent. I found another David Mammano in Italy. So,
nice.
Whenever a new social media thing comes out, I think you're always at a race to get it first. So, like Instagram, I got David Mammano before he did. And, so, but you're lucky. You're the only one. So, hey, Tasha, this has been super, super fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it. You're doing great work. And I really hope to meet you someday. It's a pleasure, Dave. Thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Avanti family, for listening to the Avanti Entrepreneur Podcast. We are here for you 24/7 at AvantiEntrepreneur.com. Come visit us. You can learn more about our events, our summits, our coaching programs, so much more. We have a lot of content for you as well. Like us on Facebook. I do videos to help you, inspire you, and to help you move forward with your next step. Thanks again, Tasha. Thank you, everybody. Make it a great day and stay awesome.